Henry, how are you?
I'm pretty good for a weekday. Thank you for having me on.
Well, I'm glad to get to know you and talk about comics and stuff. I see that you wrote, what is it, 9 novels?
Yeah, 9 novels and some shorter fiction, all prose so far. Well, except I did have an abortive start on a science fiction graphic novel, and I haven't completely given up on it yet, but I only got a couple pages of that posted.
So that's over how many years?
Well, I started. Well, you want the the number of years I'm published, or
Well, the
like when
number of years you over which you wrote those 9 books.
okay, so the short answer is over since about 2010. But actually, my first one that published, I had written it right back during the opening days of the War on Terror. So that's even older. So there's about a
Okay.
10, almost a 10-year break between when I wrote it and when I actually got it published.
Okay. So you're churning out what, 0.75 books per year at this point or something like that?
I'll take your word for it because I'm lousy at math.
Yeah, same. Yeah, well, that's wild. Writing one book, finishing one book is hard enough. So
Yeah.
congratulations, man. Good job. Yeah. So
Oh,
there was
thank
a
you.
10-year break. What was that break about? You do have to
Oh, it's
work
just,
or
well, so the full story, I don't know how much you know about the publishing business, probably more than I do. But
I doubt it.
back when I finished that first book, um, TradPub was the whole world as far as I knew. I didn't know anything about publish on demand. I didn't know anything about ebooks. I'm not even sure if ebooks were around yet. Um, and I'd been, almost all my life I'd been told that TradPub is the only game in town. Everything else is a vanity press, and you're just wasting your time if you pursue that route. So you got to get an agent, or you got to get published by a big house, and by that time, you couldn't do that without an agent. So basically, that time in between there, I was, well, proverbially beating my head against the wall, trying to get someone to read my query, and that never worked out. And actually, I found out about self-publish or the new self-publishing craze uh, about 2008, 2009. And I was so programmed by then to reject anything that sounds like vanity press that I just blew it off. Like, but other people are doing it, and I knew some people that were doing it. But I was like, oh, no, no, that's for amateurs. Or, professionals don't do that. You have to get accepted by the big five or the big three or whatever it is now. Um, and so at first I just blew it off, just like a knee-jerk reaction. And it wasn't until by chance, and I think this was around 2010, by chance, I read someone, I was in a writers group online, and I read that someone referred to ebooks and e-readers. And this is the first I heard of them. And I, so I was like, what is this? And I went to go check it out. And immediately I thought, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Why would I need a device that requires batteries when I can just take a paperback with me wherever I go? But over time, obviously I changed my mind. And, there's a lot of advantages to using an e-reader. You can carry thousands of books around with it in it. It weighs less than one single paperback. So, and when I found out how easy it is to get published, um, I I finally jumped in there.
okay, so it was like a 10-year process. You kind of given up on it because you figured that the
Yeah,
big publishers, it's too hard to get in, it's no use, and then
yeah,
it clicked that you can just write books and put them out there, and that's no problem.
right. And the more I learned about it, the more, the old paradigm, it died hard, like I was saying, but it took a while to get around that. But then once I did, and I started looking at it with honest curiosity, I realized there's really no advantage to waiting to holding out to get trad pubbed. unless your name is, unless you've already made it somehow, unless you've already won the Trad Pub lottery and you got a big name. For unknown, like I was, it, really all the advantages were in self-publishing because you can't, unless your name is Stephen King or David Baldacci or one of those guys, the companies aren't going to do any marketing for you anyway. So yeah, even if you get published, your book will sit on a shelf somewhere if you're lucky, where browsers might be able to find it. And but everything's in the marketing I found out, and of course it's the thing that I'm worst at. But unfortunately, in the way the indie fiction business, the self-publishing, which self-publishing is a part of that, there's so much to like about it. There's so much good about it. But on the other hand, what has happened is the slush pile from these traditional publishers has been transferred to Amazon customers, basically. So you got this enormous mountain of slop out there, and it's so anybody can get published now, and they are, and everybody is getting published, and most of them really have no business. Uh, they're not at that point yet. They're where their prose is solid enough that they should be putting it out in the public.
Mhm.
And I forgot what led me to that. I went off on a tangent, and I forgot where I was heading with it.
Oh, I see. Yeah, we were just talking about how it clicked that you could just put books out there.
Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of advantages to it, and there's no disadvantage via the traditional publishing because they're not going to market for you anyway. Like I said, unless you're a big name already, and then they'll do the New York Times bestseller list or whatever scam they got going on. So you got to do your own marketing anyway, and you got complete editorial control, excuse me, over your own work. You decide, like if they want you to take something out, but you think it's strong enough, it's important enough to leave it in there, then you make the call. You get to leave it in there. If there's a all the decisions are yours basically. So everything the book does or fails to do is really on you. And what my books have failed to do are on me, mostly because I'm a horrible marketer.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So
But
the
sorry.
marketing game is something I've thought about too. Because I had some friends who were in marketing,
Hmm.
and I was in a band before, and I found the similar issue like as you. So it doesn't make sense to try to maneuver your whole life to try to get some kind of record deal or something.
Yeah.
It makes more sense to just make music and figure out a way to put it out there. Of course, making music is a lot more expensive. Uh,
Right.
but I've
Yeah.
had friends that were in marketing and I asked them like, how do you market? I don't understand. And their insistence was always just tell tell the story of what you're doing. It was always just like just tell the story and tell the truth.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I'm sort of right now convinced, not 100%, but I'm sort of convinced that as long as you keep doing something every day, um, at minimum you get good.
Right.
But if you persevere, I don't think a big break is a really good way of looking at it. You build things slow by slow. That's kind of how I'm convinced of it now.
It's not realistic. Yeah, I think it's really a myth. The big break or the puncher's chance,
Yeah,
I don't think it's really available for us. Um, it's you'd have better luck, getting lightning to strike a certain spot than
yeah.
uh than doing that. But I didn't know you were a musician also, so you're an illustrator and a musician.
Well, I
So you're a
well
double
I
threat.
was a musician and I stopped making music, and now
Uh-huh.
I'm focusing on illustration. About my professional, my like official like college background is in graphic design.
Uh-huh.
So like the visual arts, and I worked in the field for like 10 years or so. I left the field because it wasn't enough art. Like, uh,
Really?
yeah, I
Yeah.
moved. Well, I was working at a newspaper and I was laying out newspaper pages and
Oh, okay.
making ads and when I moved to I was in a kind of a smallish town
Hmm.
and I moved to the big city. I moved to the city where there's like Canada's biggest graphic design college. So I was coming from a semi-senior place in my smaller province. I went to the other coast and I was a semi-senior or senior competing with juniors just coming out of college who are willing to work for 13, 14, 15
Yeah.
bucks an hour, right?
Yeah.
So it was just I literally applied at like 100 jobs and
Wow.
got one call back to work in a print shop, and I was like, this is not making sense. So I just veered out, and I'd always been a musician, so I really put my effort into music. But after 27 years of exploring the music thing, putting out a few albums, um, I got my gear stole. The
Ooh.
lockdowns came.
Hmm.
My one of my band guys crapped out just through laziness, and
Hmm.
I did some music stuff like research projects and stuff and podcasts, and I just kind of decided I want to do something that's artistic where I don't have to rely on other people.
Yeah, and music is such a collaborative effort, just like, filmmaking and so forth. And chain's only as strong as its weakest link, and it's really hard to assemble a team to accomplish anything without getting at least one weak link in there.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's sad.
it
What kind of
was.
music did you play?
Yeah, so we played it was I would say like people would call it the drone experimental. We didn't really think about genre. We just started playing and whatever sounded good we kept doing.
Hmm.
Um, so it's kind of better to describe the instrumentation. So the singer was like a throat singer, doing Tuvan throat singing and various and with sound effects like effects running that through effects and loopers and stuff.
Okay.
And
So really
so
electronic music or
no, it was really a blend
synthesized?
of all sorts of things. I played acoustic guitar through a whole bunch of effects. And so looping, so it because it was acoustic, it had folk stuff, but then it would turn veer into metal.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and
That's pretty
then
eclectic.
our third guy was like he was our electronics guy. His instrument was the Nintendo DS running Korg software. So he was like doing beats and very strange sounds and stuff. So I feel we made it work, but
Yeah.
we didn't build a huge fan base. It's not like we were like an Iron Maiden cover band or something, right?
Right, right.
But yeah, we did do a couple albums. Third album, we were like 75% written, and this guy just kind of pooped the bed, and that just like I was like, dude, I'm not doing this anymore. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm drawing, I'm writing, I'm making comics. I've always liked comics when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I grew up in a super strict religious environment, and comics were people were suspicious of comics. My parents were kind of
Really?
yeah, it was kind of one of those things like that's where the demons are or whatever. Like I'm
Huh.
oversimplifying it, but
Yeah.
violence, sex, they were just like they were scared of all that. But as an adult, when I finally kind of got rid of all that, I I went to the library and I took out all of the comics that were there and I read all of the comics.
I'm just curious, I don't want this to become a big tangent, but did they limit your TV watching too, or did they not even have a TV in the house?
Yeah, growing up, we didn't have a TV.
Okay.
We got a TV when I was like just a little kid, and then credit where it's credit's due. My dad noticed that when he was coming home from work, he'd say, I wouldn't acknowledge him. I was too like kind of
Hyper
zoned
focused on the
into,
screen.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So he said, we're getting rid of this TV. And you know what? Of all my parents, like they did the best they could. They made a lot of mistakes, but that
Yeah.
was not a mistake. I'm glad about that. I really am
Right.
grateful. Yeah, it's I spent my time chasing my dog in the woods, right, and pretending I was in other worlds. So it was much healthier, yeah.
Sounds similar to my childhood. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't these so much. Well, of course, if my mother had known some of the stuff that was in the comics that I read, it would have been, she would have probably cracked down on that. But there's this big perception from her generation, comics were for kids. And when I was growing up and I discovered comics, by that time they were not really for kids anymore. They're like for college age and up, I would have guessed. And so there were some mature themes in there. The politics were creeping in already. Excuse me, I was too oblivious to all that stuff to notice it first. So to me, it was just the story and the action and the whole, and of course, superhero comics were the thing for me. I
Mhm.
did do some, I did read some other kinds of comics, but at a very hard ratio from because superheroes were that's what I was all about, and I think, yeah, who knows why, but the uh, the intrigue of it and the excitement, and it was a completely different world from anything I knew, and good always beat evil, and
Mhm.
yeah, that just really appealed to
Well,
me.
what did you like reading then?
Well, of course, my favorite from the very moment I started was Batman.
Yeah.
And of course the kids I knew at the time, it was always Superman because he's the strongest. But Batman
Would
and then
would that have
Spider-Man.
been Neil Adams?
Yeah, so no wait, I think it was after Neil Adams. I read his Ra's al Ghul um saga that was put together in one of those big tabloid size
Yeah,
collector's
yeah,
editions, and I still have it, I think.
yeah.
But that was like years after that had come out. So who the heck was it by the time I came along? It was after Neil Adams.
Yeah, so,
But
it's like the second guy who like went to the moon, like nobody cares about him. It's like
right,
Neil
right.
Adams like went to the moon.
Yeah, and actually
Could it have been Aparo? Jim Aparo?
it might have been. Here's a embarrassing fact about me is I didn't pay attention to who the artists or the
Right,
writers were for the
of course.
longest time. Um, the first writer I really took notice of was Doug Minch.
Hmm.
And he did a Batman. He had a tour on Batman during the 80s and I think maybe the early 90s. And he's the first one I really noticed. And he just did some, at the time, I was really impressed with his plotting and stuff. He did some very interesting, fascinating stories.
Mhm.
One of them was, and I don't know when you picked up, if you remember reading any of his, but I think he got started on Moon Knight. And
Yeah.
I did read a couple Moon Knight stories that were in the back of that black and white Hulk magazine, like the
Hmm.
magazine size. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And I didn't piece it together that he was the same guy that was writing Batman at the time, but he did I guess a mini series you'd call it, called The Thief of Night. Um, and what's her name? Nocturna was part of this mess. Um, and anyway, just that whole storyline was like, by that time, I had kind of put comics aside for a while, but I found an issue from that and I started reading again because of that.
Hmm.
Just and I was actually such a fan for a while. I looked for him on the internet and I saw some interviews that he did. That's how I know that's how I know that he did Moon Knight because apparently I didn't look at the credits at the time. But there's a lot of stuff. I don't think him and I would be friends, but I was really um I was impressed with his plotting.
Yeah. Yeah. So you wrote a bunch of books and you're a big fan of comics, but you've only started working on a comic fairly recently, if I understand correctly from your Substack.
Well, by recently, well, here's what happened. It was about 2020, and I hope you got time for a long story.
Let's have it.
I'll try to condense it a little bit. But in 2020, I'd kind of given up on the dream because when I was a kid, what I really wanted to do was produce my own comics. And at the time, I was drawing myself. I was self-taught, so I ingrained a bunch of mistakes, a bunch of bad habits. But I was an artist first before I started writing. But anyway, so that's what I wanted to do. As years went on, and adults convinced me that prose is what serious writers do. That's the important thing to do. And I shifted, and I started writing more than I drew, and eventually I gave up drawing altogether. So it was about 2020, and I was on Gab, and of course I put up in my profile that I was an author and I had some bestsellers and stuff. And of course, the whole reason I'm in social media is for something like this to happen. But I was in there so long and so, I don't know, jaded or whatever, so numb to it all. When it actually happened, I wasn't expecting it. This guy sent me a DM, sent me a private message, and I looked at it and he said, "Hey, Henry, I really like your prose. Have you ever thought about graphic novels?" And at first, it was just, I I thought he was trying to pitch me his graphic novel or something, so I'd buy it. I didn't know exactly what he was up to, and I was at that point I was almost afraid to hope, that it was what I wanted. And I said, "Oh yeah, I like graphic novels. I've got a few of them, but as far as making them, I don't draw anymore." Um, anyway, long story short, there he had a little publishing company. He was working out of somewhere in Europe. I think he was Finnish. He was Finnish, but he wasn't working in Finland. Anyway, he was soliciting me to write a graphic novel for him. And he
For
was going to
him
get
as
the,
an artist?
no, he was just the publisher. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, and I'll get to that. Um, and when I finally realized what he was offering, I was like, yeah, I've had a couple ideas in mind for years that I've been, germinating up here. And so I wrote the script, and I wrote the script for the science fiction one. Uh, and I don't know, it didn't take me too long. Um, and I sent it to him, and he went and found an artist somewhere and got him to write the sample page. So draw the sample page for me. And it was pretty good. And anyway, that fell through because they couldn't agree on a price. I was happy with just getting royalties from it, if it sold any copies. So I didn't ask for anything up front, but the artist did. Um, and then he tried to find another artist, and this took on like a process of months. This was going on, and he and I were DMing back and forth all the time. And I was getting really more and more excited all the time. I was like, yeah, this is real. This is going to happen. Um, and anyway, so the while he was working on while he was negotiating with the second artist, he just like ghosted me, or so I thought. He just stopped DMing me, stopped answering my texts, or, and Um, time went on, and I tried over and over again, and he just disappeared off the face of the earth, as far as I could tell. And I worry, I think the worst because he shared a little bit of his personal history, and he was a cancer survivor. And of
oh,
course, I'm thinking now maybe he was in remission, but it came back or something, and now he's really gone.
yeah.
So without not hearing from him, and I know he had a wife, but I didn't know her contact info or anything. So without any other information, I assume that's what happened. But whatever happened, and I pray that he's all right, or that he didn't suffer too much if he is gone. But whatever happened, the bug had bit me by then. I was because the whole time I was after I wrote that script and we were looking at the sample art and stuff, all these other ideas that had bottled up here for years and years started coming out. It's like, you know what? I need to start writing those too. Because if this is a success, maybe he'll want to do another one. And of course, the idea I had in mind was a superhero script. Um, and I wrote that. Actually, I wrote three graphic novel scripts for all part of the same series, a superhero ensemble
So how many
story, I
how
guess.
many pages per book?
So they would be illustrated. They would all be a little over 100 pages.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, this is a really long, even longer, depressing story, and I have it in a series of articles on Substack if anybody ever wants to read it. But to summarize it, I went out and now that the bug had bit me, I was like, okay, I'm going to try to do this myself, and I decided to focus on the superhero story. No, actually, I started on the science fiction one first, and that artist, I helped him out, and he took advantage, and then I was like 20 pages in. So I'd spent all this money on him and he decided to jump ship for another project. And anyway, so I decided to shift gears and I went to focus on the superhero one. And I just had a, whew, boy, I was really down on artists for a long time because of my experiences there. Just not professional, not dependable. They don't listen to instructions. Um, and they ghost you. They flake constantly, or some of them are just grifters. And I wasted a lot of time and money. This was I started back in like 2020, and it's not until uh, this year, not until this year. And by the way, I'd given up on finding an artist by then. I was like, maybe I should look into AI, and I did experiment with that a little bit and was thinking about it. I was also thinking, well, I guess I have to reteach myself to draw. And so I got Clip Studio Paint and I got some books and stuff. And I started to practice sketching again. And that was going to be a long uphill climb. But long story short, I don't know if you use Fun My Comic at all. No? Do you
No.
know about it?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So I forget why, but I was trying to think ahead and I was trying to think like a marketer, learning from my mistakes. And I was thinking like the only way if I do get the pages done, I'm gonna have to crowdfund. And I know nothing about crowdfunding. I've never done it. I know just enough to be dangerous. So I decided to start doing some research on crowdfunding. And that's probably why I joined the Fund My Comic Discord. And I was on there for I don't know how many months. And I noticed that they had a little, what do you call it on Discord? A subgroup or a
Yeah,
channel
channel.
or a channel? So there's this channel on the Fund My Comic Discord called uh, Collab Search, something like that. So I thought, I wonder if that means collaboration. And by this time, I'd lost a lot of money, and I wondered, if there are any artists out there who'd be willing to collaborate and like do a royalty share. So I went on there and looked, and I wrote this message that is basically like, I know none of you are gonna do this. I know I'm just wasting my time here, but here's my sob story, and here's what I want to do. And two artists immediately, like within the hour, two artists immediately responded to it. Because normally I would have left it there and gone off and maybe checked it a week later. But they immediately responded, and one of them was Luke Stone himself. And I didn't even know at the time. I'd been watching Nerd Bacon. I don't know if you watched that. That was his, no, that was his live stream, I guess. I watched it on YouTube after they'd been recorded. So I'd been watching that a little, trying to learn what I could. And previously I had commissioned him to draw a couple covers for this first superhero book. I was thinking, well, if I ever do get the pages done, I'll want a cover. So he says he has some time off now, and the rates he was offering were really reasonable. So I jumped on that. And so he had drawn those for me. I didn't know he did the sequential art too. I thought if he's a cover artist, he's getting money for that. but he's a cover artist. He said that's his what do you call it? What's that expression? Your bread and butter.
Right.
Um, and so I looked, and his rates were industry standards. They're very reasonable. My standards are a little hard to scrape up the money for. And the other guy was also his work looked pretty good, and he was offering a little bit less. But I thought I knew something about Luke's character because I'd been watching those Nerd Bacon stuff, and I knew a little bit about him. Plus, I'd worked with them before. Um, so I thought, so anyway, long story short, I commissioned him, and he's putting it together now. And like I said, it's a little over 100 pages, and he's got a little over half the pages illustrated now. It's black and white, and I'm trying to color it myself. And boy, am I learning a lot, like how much time it takes. Uh, Way more time than I ever thought it would take to do that.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
part of that's because I'm learning it as I go and I'm making a bunch of mistakes. But wow, but long story short, I'm hoping that I have all the pages colored by sometime in 25, and then I'm able to go crowdfund it.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So what, tell us what the story's about. Tell us about the book.
Oh, okay. So I wrote an elevator pitch here, if you don't mind me reading.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm a good writer, but I'm not such a good talker.
So far, so good.
So here's what I have. A zeitgeist is building against the existing world order and its increasingly autocratic puppet states. Anonymous vigilantes, resistance fighters, and ultra-human subversives are rising up against globalist regimes, and chaos rises with them. A cosmic quake opens up seemingly random dimensional portals across the Earth, and some of the disoriented visitors emerging from them uh, add to the existing ultra-human and dissident crisis. Turbo Knight drops through a portal from the Korean War. His culture shock and notions of chivalry render him, sorry, confused and conflicted in the path of the developing rebellion. Which side will he decide to fight on? After the Juggernaut interferes with a government sanctioned riot, police and the armed forces commit the worst possible blunder against somebody of his temperament and threat quotient. They piss him off. His resulting rampage rips a trail of mayhem and carnage across America with force that an atomic hurricane couldn't match. The Phantom Raider is a homegrown urban guerrilla backed by a secret team of cyber spies. He routinely infiltrates secure facilities, leaks sensitive information, and hijacks the Orwellian surveillance network for his own purposes. His identity is secret, his tracks are covered, and his techno mischief is a made is a major thorn in the side of those tasked with narrative control. All assets are deployed to hunt the dissidents, both native and visitor, with and without powers. The Pentagon and the Institute of Unorthodox Sciences build their own team of ultrahumans to enforce establishment policies and neutralize the super renegades. Both the establishment and rebel factions consider themselves on the right side of history. There's no possibility of compromise. Only raw, naked force will decide who prevails.
Hmm. Am I detecting a little bit of like something like a military research or perhaps experience or something like that? Because a couple of the characters seem to be informed by some military knowledge or something.
Well, yeah, I'm an ex-GI, so
Okay. Okay.
that probably I didn't know it bled through that obviously, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
There's definitely so Turbo Knight, the first one I mentioned, of course, as a boy, he was into chivalry and the history and knights, and he was also into aviation. He became the youngest Thunderbolt pilot, in the European theater during World War II.
Hmm.
He was shot down. He lost his legs as a result of enemy fire, and he, by the time of like around the time of the Berlin airlift, he had developed an exoskeleton, with influences by the medieval knights. And he, by the time of Korea, he self-designated himself as I guess you'd call him a rescue pilot, to rescue down pilots that were falling behind enemy lines when they were shot down in Korea. And anyway, so he was doing that when he drops through this dimensional portal. Um,
Hmm.
and then Juggernaut has no military background, but I probably
Well,
use some.
yeah, but his the way he described the effects of his not rampage, but his well, his actions are something about an atomic blast or something.
Oh,
Yeah.
you
So,
want the quote? I have to read this.
yeah.
Uh, his rampage across America. Oh, wait, sorry. His resulting rampage rips a trail of mayhem and carnage across America with force that an atomic hurricane couldn't match.
Yeah. I picked up these little cues, just the way you use your wording and the way you set up your conflicts, and that got me thinking either he's served or like has done a lot of research into the like world
Yeah.
wars and that sort of thing. Like, because there is such a thing as like a like a war nerd who's never served, that just
Well,
like
that's probably me. Yeah. I'm a history nerd or history buff, if you want to be polite.
yeah,
And also, I thought the purple prose was okay considering I don't know if you used to read the bullpen bulletins
yeah, yeah,
that Stan Lee would publish in his comics, and he used all these alliterative phrases and stuff,
yeah,
and
yeah,
really punched up the dialogue, to make it more
yeah,
dramatic or whatever. So I
yeah,
figured, and when I started reading, it was, I guess you'd call it the Bronze Age when I started reading.
yeah.
So that's the biggest conflict comic influence on me. Although I'm quite a fan, I've always been kind of nostalgic, hence my love of history. So um, I was always fascinated by the Silver Age, excuse me,
Mhm.
the Silver Age and the Golden Age,
Yeah.
stuff that happened before I came along. And so I researched that a lot, and I bought comics and compilations of comics from those eras whenever I could, and I've read a lot of them, and so that's probably some influence on me as
We
well.
got three, we got the three ages represented here. We got
Uh-oh,
the, the golden age,
nice.
the
Oh,
Superman.
the cover from Action Comics 1.
Yeah, those are all
That's
the
sweet.
original Action Comics stories
Uh-huh.
that are wild and maniacal. I'd never realized like Superman was like a psychotic like terror.
I remember you telling me about that. Did you
That's
know that
crazy.
Simon and Schuster were did I get it right?
Silver Age.
Siegel and Schuster. Did you know that they originally envisioned him as a villain?
Oh, really?
Yeah, and when you told me about that one, I was like, I wonder if that was one of their original scripts. They reworked for, you know, once they found out that he's a hit.
When he goes on a rampage because people are like driving badly.
I know, right?
It's a road rage
Well,
Superman.
on the one hand, I can empathize with him there.
Yeah, yeah. So we got Silver Age here, Legion of Superheroes, and Bronze Age.
Yeah, okay.
So
So
I'm more
did
of
you
a DC guy.
did you get those off Amazon?
No, no, those I got it. I think maybe I got this one off of eBay, but
Okay.
yeah, I got this one at the shop. It was just kind of sitting there. I just love the cover, the Atom all wrapped up in wire.
Mm-hmm.
It's just yeah, just so cool. And this I ordered it from the shop too. I try to support the shop if I can.
Yeah. I don't have any comic book shops near me. I don't, of
No, I
course.
I'm very lucky. Like I moved to this town. It's 100,000,
Hmm.
population, small town, and the shop in town was pretty lame. I think but now I realize that he was selling his shop to these two guys, these two brothers, and
Hmm.
he was kind of checked out, right? So he was just not interested, and
Okay.
yeah. But now these two guys are like keen, and they're excited, and when you're there, they're interested in
Okay.
what you're up to. And I've been drawing
Why would you
this.
own a shop if you're not into it?
Yeah, I think he was just ready to retire. But I've been
Yeah.
drawing this like on backing boards
Uh-huh.
because the guys at the shop, like they display them and they sell them off. I thought maybe
Nice.
I'd try a few. And so I'm
That's actually a
drawing,
pretty good idea.
that's what I'm doing. Yeah, drawing on the back of a backing board, and then it fits in a bag, right?
Yeah.
And like or I might do like I don't know, five of them and then like just give them two and just put them in the back issue bins and do like a Christmas, I don't know, bin diving thing. If you there's X amount of pieces of original art in the back issue bins, if you find them, they're yours. You got to buy like $50 worth or something
Yeah.
of books, and if you get find the book, find the thing, you can have it. Something like that, just to help them out.
Yeah.
It's pra good practice for me, drawing in a different format and stuff. So
Yeah. And maybe someday someone will ask the shop owners, hey, who is this guy?
yeah, well, on the back,
Hopefully, right?
I'll put my newsletter on the back. I'll sign and I'll put my newsletter on the back, or maybe uh, I put a QR code people can
Hmm.
scan. Yeah,
That's a good
yeah.
idea.
Just trying different things. Yeah. Yeah, superhero book, 2025. Tell people your Substack, so they can go sign up and make sure to get some updates about that.
Yeah, it's actually, ooh, is it Hank Brown or Henry Brown at Substack.com?
Um,
I use both names interchangeably.
I I'm on your Substack, and I've always seen Henry Brown.
Okay, so that's probably it.
Must be Henry Brown. Let me
Yeah.
just double check it. Check it right now. Henry Brown. Uh, oh, Substack.com/ at Machine Trooper.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's my handle on most social media platforms. Also, if I have a blog, uh, www.virtualpulp.net
Virtual
and
what? Pulp.
virtual pulp,
Yeah.
yeah, .net. And I have my two Substack stacks linked there. So it's
Cool.
easy to find that way if no other way.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you have a title for the book? I didn't ask you the title.
Yeah. So Threat Quotient is a title for the first
Okay.
one.
Okay. I like
Yeah.
that. You kind of put it's the first thing that gets me about any story is always the world building.
Hmm.
And so that is a piece of world building, the threat
Yeah.
quotient. Yeah,
Oh, you want another one?
let's
So you
have
said
it.
you're a DC guy, right?
Yeah.
So you know how of course Marvel uses New York City and real places, but in DC you have Gotham and Metropolis and Star City and all these places. I'm kind of taking the DC approach. So it's an alternate reality
Hmm.
what the story's based in. So I have different names for different cities.
Yeah,
Um
cool.
and
It's way more fun that way.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
gives you a little bit of buffer room, right? In case you got those spurgs who like, wait a minute, it takes 1 hour and 55 minutes to go from Kansas City to, whatever.
There's no 800 block on 6th Street.
Exactly. So I'm hoping I outflank that right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm doing the same with my story. Um I wanted to make a story in Canada, but I'm like, I don't want Canada sucks right now. I don't want
Mm.
to I want to do something like the spirit of Canada. That's what I really want, right?
You mean the spirit as in the Will Eisner spirit of Canada?
No, as in
Is in a zeitgeist?
what the soul of Canada is according to me,
Gotcha.
right? Yeah, so
Well, that
yeah,
sounds interesting. So what is the soul of Canada according to you?
I'm still learning. Uh, I I I went to school, so I grew up in New Brunswick, which is a bilingual province. Uh, it's 60/40 English French,
Hmm.
because it's on the East Coast, so it's the oldest part of Canada other than Newfoundland, and so it was hit by French settlers, right?
Right.
And then it was the English came, right? And then there was the English-French War in the 18th century, and then the English deported the French, which were called Acadians, and they went to New Orleans and they became Cajuns. But some of
Okay.
them who stuck around and hid in the woods with the natives and stuff, like reformed. And then after the war had passed, they kind of rebuilt their communities, right? And there
Hmm.
were farmers there and stuff. So that place became like an English and French place. So my ancestry is English, French, and Irish, but I was in the French village, even though I have an English name. I went to French school and I was French and I spoke Acadian and everything. And
Uh-huh.
so in that school, because you're basically the minority and you are the people who were deported, it became culturally important for the French to teach Acadian history in Canada, right? So we learned a lot less of Canadian history and we learned a lot more of the history of just the French in that province, right?
Okay. Okay.
So I've actually bought this Canada history book. I have to, is it it's just called Canada.
Yeah.
I've been reading a little bit of Canadian history, kind of learning how, and the thing is Canada is such a large country, landmass,
Hmm.
and not a lot of people. So there's a lot of mini histories,
Right. Yeah.
and
Regional and
it's hard to kind of put it like East Coast, West Coast is a whole different thing. I don't know
uh-huh.
if it's like that in America, but to me, America from the outside, it feels like it's a single history because there's just more people spread out across. It just feels more
Seems
coherent, or
homogenized.
yeah, or no, but I mean, it's I don't know, it feels like there's a through story that's easier to find. You had your
Oh, okay. Okay.
leaving Britain, you had your Civil War, you had I don't know, maybe what was it called, the Dust Bowl, or not
Oh,
Dust
during the
Bowl.
Depression.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, the Dust Bowl during the Depression. Yeah. And the boll weevil epidemic
yeah.
and all that. Yeah. There's
I don't know.
well, I guess I guess every country's that way. From the outside, it seems homogenized. It seems all unified. But
Yeah,
once you delve inside, there's
yeah,
so much diversity.
yeah.
In fact, I think it was Daryl Cooper. I was listening to one of his podcasts not long ago, and he mentioned, and I'd kind of known this because, I was stationed in the South. Uh, I was stationed at Fort Bragg, which North Carolina, which was part of the South. And so I met some people off post there, and I hung out with the civilians when I had a chance, and I found out that some of them, at least their parents, were still kind of upset about the Civil War.
Oh,
They
really?
call a lot of people call it the war between the states, which is more accurate than Civil War. But some down there at that time, they still called it the War of Northern Aggression.
Oh,
Yeah, and come to find out on Daryl Cooper's podcast, he mentioned, I think this was South Carolina, but they never celebrated the 4th of July or Independence Day. They never celebrated that because that was a Yankee thing. They
ah,
never they never celebrated it until like 1943 and the height at the peak of World War II. That's it took that long before they started identifying as Americans
okay.
and with all the accompanying patriotism and so forth.
Right, right.
So
So Daryl Cooper, that's the musician, the black guy who converted a bunch of KKK guys.
no, no,
No, okay. Because
no, he's
there. Daryl Davis. Daryl Davis.
No,
Daryl
Daryl.
Davis. I think it's his name. It's a Daryl guy. He's a musician and he's a black guy. And
Uh-huh.
he went to befriend a bunch of racist guys to try to understand them. And turned out like he kind of turned them not racist because they
How long
just got
ago
to
was
know.
this?
That was like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago. There was this
Okay.
documentary. Uh, I think it's Daryl Davis. Yeah. And he's still got the robes of the KKK guys
Oh my gosh.
that they gave to him
Uh-huh.
because they were like, you kind of like helped me escape this cult, basically.
Right.
And so he
Wow.
keeps it as kind of like a trophy thing.
Yeah, I
So
guess
different Daryl.
I would too. Those are big bragging rights right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I guess yeah, it doesn't fit the narrative, but that's a story that I wish I had heard.
Yeah,
It's
no, but I thought you said that because he went to this. That's how he learned about people upset about the
uh,
war.
oh, okay.
That's why I put those things together. I did it incorrectly, but that's how I was threading it together.
Yeah, I fused. I didn't give you a polite transition between my experience and what this guy said. The Daryl Cooper, I'd never heard of him before, and I don't think most people had heard of him until he did that Tucker Carlson interview. And
Oh,
then he's a he's a fan of history, if not a historian himself, and he studies history. And he what really put him on the map was he busted up, he punched a big hole through the mythology, surrounding World War II. And he discovered on his own some things that I've been discovering on my own through my own studies, such as they are. Uh, and anyway, so what he said, people are still so invested in that mythology that really he got a lot of hate mail after that. And
okay.
a lot of people still don't want to hear what he has to say. But anyway, as a part of that, it was so when I heard what he had to say, and I was like, yeah, this is the same kind of stuff I'm finding out. So I went, of course, and I wanted to listen to him too. And while I'm coloring, I need something to listen to. So I listened to podcasts and I listened, and this guy, on that particular day, I was like, okay, I've been away from politics a while now, so I can maybe take another dose of it. So I listened to, and not that he's really political, but I listened to it, and I forget what the subject of the podcast was, but he mentioned how long it took before those former Confederate states finally assimilated into the greater American culture. And that
Yeah.
was one of the anecdotes that he shared
Yeah.
that I
Okay.
thought was
Okay.
illustrative. Yeah.
All right. Well, that I struck out on that one.
Yeah. That's all right. You taught me something. You can bet I'm probably going to be looking up Daryl
I'm pretty
Daryl
sure
Davis.
it's Daryl Davis. He's a
Daryl with
fascinating
a
guy
Y.
because, like it's in this kind of Daryl, is it Daryl? Daryl Davis. Yeah, that's his name.
Yeah.
In this kind of environment of like separation, like he did the exact opposite. He took a curiosity
Uh-huh.
because his whole idea is like, how can you hate me when you don't even know me?
Right.
That was his
Oh,
whole thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
It seems such a no-brainer, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, people are raised different or they learn different
Yeah.
things or they have different experiences. And so he had some negative experiences, both
Oh, I'm sure.
from black people and like racist white people. Like it's just people, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway, he's a super fascinating guy. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, it took some guts too, I bet.
But yeah, Spirit of Canada. So far, I'm learning little bits and stories that I'm gonna be integrating. But one thing I'm noticing a lot is wilderness because it's a rough country to survive
Right.
in before all of this electricity and toilets that flush and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and it's a lot of people coming here with it's like, well, if I can survive. I can make a go of it. But basically, it's if I
Right.
can survive. Like people, Ukrainians, like getting a or Germans getting a plot of land in
Mhm.
northern Saskatchewan. They're
Yeah.
not doing that. It's not a pursuit of luxury, right? It's like, well, I might be able to farm if I can survive, kind of thing. There's a lot of that. Um,
Well, it's
and
it's a kind of endeavor that breeds rugged individualism.
yeah,
You know.
and the thing is Canada is mostly uninhabited.
Right.
So 95% of Canada is nobody lives there, right?
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
it's all along along your border. So we're human beings are a minority in Canada,
Yeah.
right? There's more polar bears than humans probably.
Because your population is what, 35 million or
Yeah, yes.
something
It's
really small compared to
yeah,
the
yeah,
population here.
yeah. So definitely the whole survival and wilderness thing, and all the best Canadian stories, not all the best, but I mean, of course, Terry Fox wasn't a wilderness guy, but uh, like all the really fascinating stories that I find are wilderness related. Like the guy who had an encounter with a grizzly, his name was Hertubis, Troy Hertubis in
Uh-huh.
northern Ontario. He was he was like a forest guy. He liked to go in the woods, and he had an encounter with a grizzly face to face that
Yikes.
freaked him out. He didn't get attacked, but from that day he was determined to build a suit that would allow him to withstand a grizzly attack.
Good luck
So-
with that.
well, he succeeded, but he couldn't really walk
But
uphill.
he couldn't move. Yeah.
Yeah. But so it's kind of a funny story, but the guy was actually a pretty brilliant, like self-made inventor guy, and he invented a lot of like he invented a paste that you could put on your skin and like put a blowtorch
Oh,
on
wow.
your and it wouldn't burn.
Now, why
Like
would you
he
need something like that? Is the first
well,
thing
he
that
was
comes.
saying like I want to sell it to NASA so they can cover the space shuttle or something. And
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah, kind of like an eccentric, strange genius guy.
Yeah.
But the whole thing was like it started with this suit he wanted to build, and then he modified it, and he wanted to sell it to the military. So I don't know, a very strange guy, but it's all like it's a wilderness thing, right? Like he went out
Yeah.
in the woods and realized how vulnerable he was, and his whole life, all his inventions are like reversing aging and stuff. It's like very weird stuff. You can tell that guy had an
Uh-huh.
encounter with a forest monster that made him realize, oh, I'm gonna die. You know? Yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
interesting
And you
guy.
find that out up there too.
Oh yeah.
Tell me if you've heard this story. There might be a Canadian version of it, but this is the Alaskan version. So this guy, I forget if he had a plane crash or something, but he got stranded up in the up in the tundra out there, and he he was on the verge of starving and maybe freezing, but he stumbles on this stilt house or this cache, from some old 49er up there. Um, and so the guy takes him in, warms him up, and thaws him out and gives him something to eat. And the guy's very grateful for it. But and I'm condensing this because there's been a long time since I've heard it. But the visitor, says, "Hey, I thank you so much for this food, but man, what do you use to wash your plates, your dishes with? They're kind of dirty." And the guy says, "I use soap and free water." "Oh, really?" Says, "Oh yeah, I'll show you. Here's soap, here free water."
No, and
Rustic humor.
there's no Canadian version of that.
No? Okay, good. All right. So that's unique to Alaska.
Yeah, well, that was good to get to know you. I like to learn about your comic books and all your different stories there. It's pretty interesting. I wish you luck on that book. It's I like the sound of it. Uh,
Oh, good. All right.
yeah, and yeah, I do you have artwork you're gonna be sharing soon or
I do have some. See, that's the thing. I've got 13 pages colored so far, and I'm wondering how long should I wait before I start sharing it? Because I don't want it to be a matter of, I share a few panels this week and it's a month before I can share more. So I want to have enough built up, ready to go so that when I start sharing them, I can do it consistently
that's smart.
and
Yeah.
regularly. So believe me, I'm chomping at the bit
Yeah.
because I want to start sharing this on Archivin and probably my blog and maybe Substack, to because what I need to do before you can crowdfund, you got to have a crowd, right?
Hmm.
And I'm brand new in comics, nobody knows me, so I'm hoping I can build a crowd to bring to, fund my comic when it's time to crowdfund it. So I do plan on doing that. I'm going to be sharing it for free. Um, yeah, and in the meantime, I'm going to try to get on some podcasts and live
Yeah.
streams or whatever,
Well,
like this. And I sure do appreciate you giving me this chance.
yeah, it was fun, man. Like
I had fun too.
just trying to keep it casual and yeah. I'm trying to not overthink this whole thing. I'm just like if oh the it just going by feel. I operate best when I'm operating by feel. So yeah, so thanks for joining me. I'm glad that we went the whole time without at all acknowledging our sunglasses. And we'll leave it at that.
But
Well,
yeah, if I ever come back on, we got to do this again.
100%. This is the thing. Like,
Yeah. Future's so bright, I got to wear shades.
all right, bud. Thanks. Have yourself a good day there wherever you are, and yeah, take care.
All right, you do the same. Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.